And I guess the question, while we're talking about turnover, Albert Breer here on the Rich Eisen Show, is how deep will the turnover be for the Giants and the Bears in front office coaching? Like those are some very interesting decisions that membership/ownership is going to have to make in those spots. What do you think about that? What do you think about that?
Sure. The Giants, so I think the Maras love Joe Judge. And I think John Mara really feels, despite the record, that he found something in Joe Judge. Despite, what a lot of people think and everything else, I do think that, he's of a mind to keep Joe Judge for 2022. I do think that, whether it's via retirement or reassignment or firing him, I think this probably is Dave Gettleman's final year. And then the question, I think, becomes whether or not you hire somebody who's got background with Joe. And the name that I know has been sort of out there in personnel circles the last couple of years is Monty Austinfort, who has a good relationship with Joe, worked with him in New England, who's the director of player personnel in Tennessee now. And so, if they hire Monty Austinfort, that'd be a sign to me, okay, they're going forward for the next couple of years with Joe, and they're giving him somebody that he's going to be able to sort of build his own team with. Mm-hmm. Or do they just hire somebody else, in which case, if you hire somebody else, you know what happens, Rich?
Yep.
Now Joe's under evaluation in 2022, right? And that GM might have a head coach that he wants, where Joe's going to have to kind of convince him not to do that a year later. So I think that's sort of the spot the Giants are going to be in January. As for the Bears, I think Matt Nagy's gone, and I think, Ryan Pace is sort of twisting in the wind to some degree. And I've heard some people say that he could survive. I've heard other people say that they think he's gone. I think Sean Payton is actually an interesting sort of piece here. And follow me here. I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, the idea of trading for coaches. Well, Ryan Pace came up in the Saints organization, has a really good relationship with Sean Payton. Is it possible that Ryan could sell Bears ownership on, I can deliver Sean Payton, and I can give you Sean Payton to help develop Justin Fields? Maybe something like that saves Ryan Pace. But I think, one way or the other, there's going to be a coaching change. And it's quite possible that whether or not Ryan Pace survives maybe depends on what Ryan Pace can pitch ownership as the next phase of where the Bears are going.
Wow, I mean, that's something else. Certainly since their first-round draft choice belongs to the Giants this year for the quarterback, that would be the one that I imagine would remotely entice Sean Payton into thinking about it, as opposed to staying put and finding the quarterback there.
He's from Chicago.
Yeah, sure. No, of course, he's Eastern Illinois, all that business. I hear you.
I think what's interesting about it, Rich, is and I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, to me it's, for some of these teams, if you want to look creative and you want to take a big swing on one of these guys who's a sitting head coach, whether it's, Mike Tomlin or Sean Payton or John Harbaugh, whoever it is, I do think, one way to look at this creatively, if you're one of those teams, is has that coach's natural conclusion been reached where he's at, And I think with Tomlin, you look at it and you say, is the GM, is Kevin Colbert retiring? Mm-hmm. Is Ben Roethlisberger retiring? Right? With New Orleans, you say, okay, he's a year past Breeze now, and they've got cap issues. Even with a John Harbaugh, it's well, they're going to pay Lamar Jackson, and maybe the dynamic there changes. So is it worth it? And it's not saying those guys have any interest in leaving, but it's just there's a natural reason why this might be the time for a separation, so it doesn't hurt to ask. They can say no.
Right.
And maybe John and Mike and Sean don't want to go anywhere, and maybe it's a non-starter. And we've heard what Mike Tomlin said about it.
Right.
But I think if you're one of these teams, at least behooves you to ask the question, right? If you're the Raiders and you need to remake who you are, who would be a better guy to put in front of all of that than Mike Tomlin? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean Mike Tomlin wants to go to Vegas, but why not ask? Right? Why not just knock on the door and say, if we threw you some picks, would you be interested in it? I just think to me, it's a creative way for these teams to start to look at these things where maybe going the conventional route isn't the way to go, because we've seen over the years how the pipeline's been dried up, and obviously, I don't know after what happened with Urban how many teams are going to be sniffing around the college ranks right now.
Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.